All right, moving over to the middleweight division now. We got Reese coming in at plus 140 going up against Michel Pereira, who comes in at minus 160. This is such a fun fight and a great fight to put in front of a crowd like Houston. Obviously Reese being a native of the Texas region, so obviously he's going to be enjoying a bit of a home field advantage there. He's coming off of a submission win over Jackson McVeigh. That was a short notice spot for him. That was one where he, came in on short notice, and a lot of people believe that if McVeigh could wear him down, McVeigh could start to run away with this in the second and third rounds, but we saw some great resilience from Reese in that first round. It seemed like he was getting handled in the Muay Thai clinch by McVeigh. McVeigh was landing nasty elbows, good knees, constantly disrupting the base of Reese and just making him pay for it with knees and elbows. He even cut Reese up with a couple of elbows as well in that first round. But in that second round, we finally saw Reese get that takedown, get some nasty shots off from that top position, and then eventually open up the rear naked choke to get the win. Reese is normally a guy that looks to get finishes on the feet. He's nasty with his striking. He has big power, but now that we're seeing him look to get fights to the ground, that's where we see him be quite successful in terms of opening his opponents up with elbows and then eventually threatening with submissions as well. I was impressed with his ability to go 15 minutes against both Jose Medina and Dushko Todorovic. Both fights, maybe not the Medina fight because of Medina's insane durability, but the Todorovic fight I expected to finish inside the distance, but he showcased a very solid all-around game. He is becoming better and better in terms of managing his gas tank. He's very slick with his submissions, even off of his back. He's a very dangerous striker, which I think is his bread and butter. It's just his durability that I have a little bit of a question mark about, and you expect that's going to be tested here against Demolador Michel Pereira. Now, if you were to tell me last year that Pereira would be on a 3-fight losing streak right now, I would call you crazy. I know he has a plethora of MMA experience. He's coming into his 46th professional fight this weekend, but he's still only 32 years old. But it's really not been looking good for him after he had his 8-fight winning streak snapped and now turned into a 3-fight losing streak. The first of those losses will give him a bit of a pass for, right? He was going up against Anthony Fluffy Hernandez, the man who headlines this card. He got worked through and eventually finished late in that fight. It was the fight after that where I think there's a lot of red flags being raised, where he went up against Abus Magomedov and did not look like himself at all. I recall having him as a lock of the night play against Magomedov because I thought he could stop the takedowns and then start landing big shots and eventually get a knockout. If you look just at the UFC stats, you'd be like, oh, Pereira did land shots. He was throwing and he was landing shots, but even the commentators were able to recognize that we were getting a shell of the version of Pereira that we normally got. And Magomedov was in the driver's seat of that entire fight. Got the takedowns when he wanted, pushed the pace in the striking realm. And, usually a guy that starts to slow down in deeper water, Magomedov looked fine the entire 15 minutes because Pereira was not providing any threat or any sort of danger to Magomedov, where Magomedov didn't have to stress out or slow down. And then after that, back in August, I think it was, Pereira goes up against UFC returning UFC fighter Kyle Daukaus, and Daukaus finished him in seconds. It was crazy. I think it was 30, 40 seconds, something like that. The only kind of success we saw Pereira have in that fight, he threw a combination, landed a nasty body kick, but it did no damage to Daukaus. And then whenever Pereira was gearing up to throw his next combination, Daukaus clipped him with a counter, put Pereira off balance, and eventually followed up with big shots to get him out of there. So the big question mark becomes, where's Pereira's head at? Is he ready to get back into the cage? Is he ready to take on another challenge here, especially a guy as dangerous as Reese? That's a big, big question mark. I expect this fight to be a car crash for the most part. If somebody goes for the takedown, it will probably be Reese. But if this fight plainly takes place in the striking realm, I expect one of these lights to go out eventually. I think there's going to be a fire under Pereira's ass, especially coming off of 3 straight losses now, to try to save his UFC roster spot and try to get that finish here over Reese. So I think that's why, as days have been going by, we're seeing money come in on the Pereira side. When I researched this fight, he was closer to minus 130. Now he's up to minus 160. And I think for good reason. On paper, I think he's the better fighter, but you can't be fully trusting of what his durability is at and where his mentality is at. But if he comes back looking 80% of what he looked like during his 8-fight winning streak, I think he eventually finds that finisher over Reese. So I'm going to go Pereira. I'm going to go Pereira by knockout, but I didn't mind the under 1.5, which is at plus money. Could still be at plus money at certain books, but I think it's going to end up closing maybe as a, maybe minus 130, minus 140, but I'm expecting a car crash here. Reese normally doesn't go into deep water. Neither does Pereira. You match both these guys up, and considering the losing streak that Pereira's on, maybe we see a little bit more of an aggressive Pereira, and that leads to an early finish. But no matter who wins, the under 1.5 should cash regardless. But my prediction will be Michel Demolador Pereira by knockout.